Alright, so I'm going to show you how to trim a bowl. With everything in ceramics, I think trimming gets overlooked a lot. I think that trimming really adds a nice look to things. It's the finishing touch. A lot of people think it's annoying, or they try to bypass it with so many different little tricks or tools or whatever. But I think it really can add to the aesthetics of a bowl, make it look really nice, elegant. And again, you got to think always about form and function, especially with something that's supposed to be useful. So right now I'm centering this bowl, and I'm going to show you first how to do it without a Giffen grip, this fancy little thing here. And then I'll show you with the Giffen grip. Not everybody has a Giffen grip, and sometimes they're not available in my classroom setting. So right now I'm just kind of seeing where it hits. So you'll see it hits my finger right there. So the next time around I'm going to stop it right there where it hits. That means it needs to go towards the middle more. So I'm going to move it over just a little bit. Spin it slowly. Right there it hits. So I'll stop it and I'll scoot it over again. Little by little. Okay, right there. Now I know that I am centered, because it touches my finger. If I hold out here, it doesn't touch at all. And if I come in, it touches all the way around. So then I would take 3 balls of clay. You can use more. Don't use too much. A lot of my students tend to use big clumps, and it doesn't help anymore. So I push 1, and first I do 2 feet, like that, and then 1 anchor. Then I'm going to come across over here, 2 feet, and an anchor. And the last one is going to be directly across from those 2. Shouldn't say directly across, but basically at 3 points of pressure in a triangle shape. So then I would start my trimming. Okay, I'm going to use the Giffen grip, because that's what my students get to see. Unless they're not available, in which case you would do this technique with the clay. So I'm going to pop this on. Open it up. Now, these things are rather expensive and they wear out kind of quick, so I prefer the clay ball method. Especially if I'm going to do an altered bowl, if I change the shape of it at all, and it's just awkward and it's not going to center with these things precisely. So first thing we're going to do is just trim off kind of a little bit of the weight, especially when you first start throwing, you throw a little heavy. So I'm going to trim off, and I want to really follow the contour of my bowl. I could make this nice and block-like if I wanted to, but I want to show you how to contour a bowl. So I'm going to go right here at this angle. On all assignments in my class, all thrown assignments, I ask for you to trim a foot, or I ask that it is trimmed with a foot. The foot just makes sure that the highest point on the bottom is the outside, so that it balances. Especially for a bowl, you don't want the center point to be up here, otherwise it'll rock around a little bit. Imagine trying to eat cereal, soup, or otherwise out of a bowl, and your bowl's rocking around. That doesn't make any sense. And the dryness on this, you can trim sort of wet. You would need it to firm up. I wait till it pops off of our wooden bats. If you use plastic bats, they dry a little bit differently. Sometimes you have to cut them off. You can trim a little wet, but I love leather hard. It's nice and smooth, it shaves off clean. Trying to trim bone dry is one of my worst nightmares. I can't stand trimming bone dry. You've got clay dust blowing in your face. There's clay dust everywhere. It gets all over your clothes, which I'm not too worried about the clothes, but it's just a mess, and it takes forever. You can see the chunk right there. It took me probably a minute. Bone dry, that'd probably take about, I don't know, 5 to 7 minutes. So you'll see I'm kind of following the contour, the shape of my bowl, and just enhancing that shape. What I see often on a bowl is people will just shave this in just a little bit right here. They'll shave it in just a bit, and it's just kind of an awkward shape. So you really want to follow that little curve of the bowl. So there we've got that portion. Now I'm ready to trim the bottom. I've got a little chunk there, right here. So I'm going to just trim that off really quickly. There it goes. Now I'm ready to make my foot. I always flick the bottom. Hear that popping sound? Later it'll get a little more thin, it'll sound like a beach ball. And that means I don't have much room to play with. So I'm gonna dig a foot, and so I hold really still. I like to brace my arm, hold my arm here. I like to hold the side of my pots in case I push down and it's a little off. So I hold over here as a counterbalance, but I hold really still. I'm kind of holding my breath here. There's all kinds of tools to do this, saw blades and things like that. I don't really have the luxury of using saw blades in a classroom setting, but I use these Kemper tools from Aardvark Clay out in the Santa Ana area. Some of them can be pretty cheesy if they're not sharp. These tend to last a while in a classroom setting, so I really like them. I'll be totally honest, I do use a little bit different tool. I use a saw blade, especially on porcelain and things like that, but for this stoneware, it's pretty groggy stoneware, so these tend to be a little bit more efficient, especially with all my students using them. So, first I dug that foot, then it leaves a little disc in the middle. I kind of got caught up talking about other things, but it leaves this little disc. I got to get rid of that, because again, I want to make sure the foot is the highest point here, so that when I flip it over, that's where it balances on, and that's where I get my stability. So now I'm going to use the rounded side before I use the square side to make that foot, that little divot. Now I'm going to use the round side just to get rid of that disc. So I'm going to start from the middle. You can work your way from the outside if you want. Doesn't really matter. So that goes away. So now I'm going to just clean that up a little bit more, and then I'm going to flick it again and see how far down I've gone. See if I have any more room to play with. It was pretty thin to start, so probably not a whole lot. It was about 1/4 inch. I got a little bit more to play with. So I'm going to go down a little bit more. I really like a thin bottom. Some people may think, okay, it might be a little weak because it's so thin, but once you get glaze over it, especially a cone 10 glaze, it'll be pretty sturdy. I've never had anybody come back to me, craft fairs, collectors, anything, and tell me they've had a bottom breakout or anything like that. So until that day, I'm going to keep making thin bottoms. And that's not to attest to all the pots need to be thin or thick. It just depends on what you're making. Obviously a mug, you want it to be nice and sturdy, but you don't want it to be too heavy in your hands either. So now I'm going to refine my foot. I've got a foot developed here. It's a basic foot. You could stop there if you really wanted to and you just aren't a big fan of trimming. But I want to make it look nice. So I'm going to carve in over here and also give myself something to play with glaze-wise. This will also cut off a little bit of weight. Obviously, you see that amount of clay going away. And then you'll see that line, that ridge that I have. Again, I want to follow the contour of my bowl. So I'm going to get rid of that. Kind of camouflage it. So now I'm going to go back to the loop tool. Just set it right against that little ridge I made. It's vibrating a little bit, so it's going to create some chattering. I like the chattering, so I'm going to leave that. You could get rid of it by slowing the wheel down and just less pressure. I'll show you the chattering really quickly. Those little lines, I kind of like those for the glaze purpose. Also that foot, that ridge I developed, when I glaze this, I'll be able to hold that foot while I dip it into the buckets that we use. So I really like to be able to hold on to the foot. I don't like a square foot because the glaze doesn't tend to stick to sharp edges, so I'm going to round it off. We are almost there. So I'm going to push this square side against that edge until it blends, and then I slowly kind of roll it over. Get some of this out of the way. I'm going to roll it over. And then I come out here and just roll it over that edge. So it's nice and soft and it's rounded. And then after it's glaze fired, I can take it and sand it out a little bit so it's nice and smooth. Okay, so I'll stop that. Take it off. Okay, you can see how it really lends to the elegance of the bowl at the end. So starting with what looked like this in the beginning, kind of rugged, and obviously I've got a mess on there, but right here it's kind of rough, rugged, and then it just makes the whole bowl look really nice. And I just put my signature, let it be known that it's handmade, and that's it. Last little pointer is this one. You can see it's kind of mushy. I always tell if things are leather hard, if it slides, like right here, it slides nicely. It's not tacky at all, so, and it's still got that rich dark color to it, so I know that it's leather hard. Right here, it's really sticky, and that's how I know it's a little too wet, and I'll wait a little while longer. Okay, that's how you trim a bowl.